Huzzah.
Yay!
Just need to see if that pops automatically for people.
Let's see. I'm on my channel.
we're the ones trolling your channel.
Ha! It does say we're live. I can see it on my channel. Cool.
Amazing. Okay.
Do we need to put the link?
Like that.
Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking no. I think everybody
Okay.
knows where to go.
Yeah. Whew.
I was going to say, before we get started, because we haven't talked about figure skating in a really long time, that we're 3 Grand Prix into the Grand Prix season. Yuzu had the whole, he was going to try the quad axel at NHK and then withdrew from NHK due to another ankle injury. Did you see Nathan's disaster of a Skate America?
I did, yeah. I felt really bad.
You know what? I felt awful in the moment, but I think nothing that was the best thing that could have happened to him.
Well, then he went back
to be beaten early in the season.
Then he went back to Skate Canada and really killed it. So
crushed it. Yeah. That's the thing. I think it was good for him to have a little bit of a scare, not at the Olympics.
I think the real story, though, is the Empress absolutely slaying.
She did good. Did you see how many triple axels were in that event, though?
You know, hey, Amy.
Hey, Amy.
There were a lot of triple axels, but hers were so consistent every single time. She's got to be close to beating Mao Asada at this point for the amount of triple axels
that's
hit
possible,
in a career.
Yeah.
Hello.
I think so. Hello. I think the thing and we've talked about this so much before, her takeoff into her triple axel, it looks like the most unstable, stiff thing, and I can't believe she gets the rotations in. I can't believe it.
No knee or
there's
super
no
forward kick. It just looks like she's going straight and then into the air, and you're like, how did she get the height?
You watch anybody else pull a triple axel, and there's the super low knee bend first, and then the super high knee kick up into it, and she just skips all that.
I know,
yeah,
she's really good.
Crazy.
I have to say, Wakaba Higuchi's triple axel was really quite something to see.
Can I tell you, my not so secret shame is in the last couple of events, I have watched all of the disciplines except for the ladies because I hate them.
Oh, come on.
I always watch figure skating. I always watch dance. I sometimes watch pairs. I never watch the ladies.
Amy, well, we're excited to have you back, Amy. You never watch the ladies. I watch the ladies and I don't watch the men.
Oh, the men are, it was really reassuring to me. I was watching Skate America, which was the first Grand Prix of the year. And in a time of great uncertainty, I felt very reassured that the men's event was as chaotic as ever, right? It felt like the most normal thing ever to see just chaos reign at a Grand Prix men's event. Amazing.
I've only been watching Nathan's. I mean, I watched Vincent's and I watched Jason's. I'm getting tired of Jason's.
You had to watch Jason's.
I'm done with Schindler's List programs. I'm done with the 2-footed landing on the quad sal.
You know what? I was watching his short program.
Hey,
One, it's a stunning program. Hey, Ron. It's a stunning program, but also the scores he's able to get in his short program always gives me hope. And then in the free, if Nathan's going to do 6 quads and Jason's going to 2-foot land 1,
okay. This sounds awful, but somebody got in a lot of trouble over in Russia for basically saying that what he was doing wasn't men's figure skating, and people were really harsh on it because it definitely had some kind of homophobic overtones. But at the same time, they weren't wrong.
The problem is that I don't know if that was the same commentary or different commentary, but there was the same kind of thing said about Papadakis Cizeron, and the comment was that they're a great team, but they will never be the best because he's gay and he can't convey the proper emotions. And
I just remember, that there's a lot of quite horrific commentary that comes out of Russia, but I just remember, I think it was Alexei Yagudin who said it. Someone said it, and
Alexei's commentary is atrocious.
Yeah, he's a horrible person. But when you got the women doing 4 quads in a program, and you can't do a single one.
Yeah, but look at his skating. Look at those component scores.
I know.
He's one of my favorites. One of my all-time favorites.
Well, we're 5 minutes in the shindig. Should we talk about books?
We should.
Okay, so we have the Lions of Al Rasoom. how do you describe this book? Like literally at the end of this book, the whole time I was reading it, I kept thinking to myself, what would I boil this book down to in terms of its plot? And
Mhm.
even when I got to the end of the book, I was like, I still don't know. Um, do you
Like
want to?
in terms of
It's
like
central
describing the
conflict,
feeling of
you
the
know?
book. Yeah, so I mean the way Guy Ko refers to, I think this one specifically, it's like the reconquest, the Spanish reconquest, the very beginnings of it, the right before it happens and as it's just starting to happen. Because the last chapter really covers like in we get that letter, that flashback about like,
Yeah.
oh, Spain is now unified again, and it's the start of like Catholic Spain.
Hmm.
Um, and then he talks more generally about his writing being always like rooted as historical fiction with that quarter turn towards the fantastic. And I think
Hmm.
in this book, if you're looking for fantasy elements, I can think of Diego, and
That's it.
that's it, right? So it's not meant to be.
Well, okay. The blind surgeon performing brain surgery at the end of the
Okay,
book.
that's fair. Yeah, yeah, that's fair. Yeah, it was. There were a couple things like that that I think have always stood out to me, and in particular, reading this again to talk about with book club, some of those things really stood out to me. So his skills for sure. Also the I had to look up how to say her name. Apparently it's Jahan is like how it's
Hmm.
pronounced in the audiobook. I always find it awkward when they make
I
names like
always
that
said
because
Johanna.
or Jahane, which I think
Okay.
sounds really like awkward in the mouth, but um every man that she comes across seems to fall madly in love with her, which I
Yeah.
find a little bit irritating.
The
Um
women in the book felt like, in a lot of ways, that they were kind of almost put on a pedestal.
mhm.
Not necessarily in a bad way, right? Hey, Josh. Um,
I
but
think all of the characters are extraordinary, right? Like every
yes,
single character in this book is meant to be extraordinary. Um,
yes.
and so it kind of gives that a bit of a pass because yes, the women are extraordinary, but also so are almost all of the men, like all the main
Yeah,
characters. There's
I
some
guess
secondary
I
characters that
found the
aren't, but
men to be flawed in ways that were interesting that I didn't
yeah.
see the women having. You know what I'm trying to
Yeah,
say?
I do. I do now that you're
Um,
talking about it.
like
Well, and Miranda we don't get enough of, right?
she was my one of my favorite characters,
Yeah,
actually.
because we get that great introduction to her.
Ugh, that was so good. Okay, so let's. I'm gonna try and do like a quick summary of this
Do
book that
it.
like
I'm ready.
kind of encompasses. So it is set in what era of Spain would you call this? I mean, it's when the Caliphate had actually
Yeah.
entered
So
into Spain, but it's not real
they've been there for
Spain.
years, right?
Yeah.
So the Moors come into Spain in like the I think the 8th century, and
Okay.
this is we're into like the 15th or 16th century. So they've been there
Okay.
for hundreds of years.
And at the opening of this book, the caliphate has pretty much fallen. It's now ruled in these kind of like city states with multiple kings, kind of vying for control. And one of these city states is a place, or cities is a place called Bitsana. Um, and they've had a history of kind of rebellion against people that have tried to rule them. They've been an unruly state. Their aristocracy has been unruly. And the book opens up with the king that controls Fizana, Al Malik the First of Cartana, committing a war crime. Basically, it opens up on him wholesale slaughtering like 139 of the aristocrats of this city and merchants. And the way this kind of like the psychological and character into the storyline is that you're following a woman named Johanna at the beginning who basically goes to one of her patients and tells them that she can't go to this event. He can't go to this event where there's where he would have been slaughtered because he's experiencing a kidney stone. The person who escorted um, her to him is actually this very important hero for Al Malik, the king. And then you also learn about these guys in the north and this army company led by Rodrigo Belmonte. Um, and they all kind of converge on Fazana at once as this war crime takes place, and in the aftermath of this. And then the rest of the book is this like sprawling epic about all the consequences that take place because of this, all of the crisscross politics, and how all three of these people become like integral to everything that's going on. And how they like touch each other both like politically and also personally. And what's interesting is that they're from the three races and religions of the area. So Rodrigo is he's Esperanian, and is that right, or is that
Yeah,
what you would call?
Esperanian and like Christian.
Yeah, and what
He's
they call
Jadeite.
the Jedites, which are the analogs to Christianity here. Uh, Amon or Amar, I can't
Amar,
remember.
yeah.
He is Asherite, and that is like the analog for Islam. And then you have Johanna, who is Kindath, and which is like this world's analog for Jewish people.
With a
Um,
lot of the same, like, your brain will fill in the details of what that means
yes,
and you won't be wrong, right?
exactly.
Like it is, the Kindath have the same sort of like founding, I don't use mythology in an irreverent term, but like the same kind of founding history and religious belief
Hmm.
that you would like, your brain is supposed to fill those details, and I think he
Yes,
hasn't
definitely.
changed what that means.
Um, uh, the theology seemed a little bit different than like the theology that you would expect, but I think you're right from the kind of like founding stories and stuff like that. And they
Yeah,
have to deal with the Kindath have to deal with a lot of the same persecution that
yeah.
Jewish people really faced throughout history. They're constantly lied about with blood libel, which is something that was horrific and happened all the time. And so they kind of have to contend with these same things. Um, Trying to pin this book down to like a central conflict is hard. Um, and I'm not sure I liked it. It was an uneven book for me. I think this book soared for me when you had our three characters like together, um where they were like on missions together and stuff like that. Like that's when the book like really sang. Like there was a
Mhm.
real chemistry between those three people. Where the book faltered for me was in its, I don't want to say it's politics, but in the way it kind of went with its more grander storytelling. I found that a lot of that kind of grander part of the storytelling felt removed. It's almost like I could feel Guy Gavriel Kay trying to imbue the story with a sense of grandiosity and self-importance, maybe that I don't know. That I don't know if it
Yeah.
needed.
And I think that's one of the things that I think Zan was the one actually in Discord who noted this in one of like the last chapters, was like, this is a thing that didn't work as well for him and maybe Heidi, but worked really well for me, is like Guy K has this way of writing. He writes really for character in a lot of ways to me. And he
Mhm,
writes these amazing characters, like you said, with those amazing dynamics between them. And there's some like really hilarious moments when it's the three of them together, and just the banter between them, the dialogue is so great. And then
mhm,
he really, as an author, like takes a step back and tries to place a conversation or a moment that they've experienced personally into this wider context. And that's what
mm,
gives it that like epic scope, because really
yeah.
we're talking about um, a small-ish group of people, but we're talking about kind of the end of an age. And I think for me, if going back to your first question of like, what is the book about? How would you summarize it? The thing that I love about this book so much is, it's, for me, it's about the end of things. You know, this is about
Mm,
the end, and Amar's character really kind of embodies that, right? We start off with him, and now you're going to hear Charlie's tip tapping as he wanders to a new location. We start with Amar going in and killing, like assassinating, right, the last caliph of this like region, and
mhm,
it's, he kind of triggers the beginning of the end, and yet he's the one, as the book progresses, he's sort of put in a position where he needs to choose what side he's going to stand on, and he chooses to stand with, more than anything, with the idea of Al Rassan and what it was to him and what it was to people. And there's a couple moments in the book where they talk about it, and again, making this comparison to real history, that society, the way that they did things, was capable of creating like such beautiful stuff, and there was tolerance. And yes, it wasn't equal society, it wasn't like a utopia, but there was a tolerance that, as the Jadites are going to come in and unite Esperania again, we know like that is the start of like the Spanish Inquisition, right? Like there is going to be, it's the end of tolerance, that's the end of an
mhm,
age of something. And I really felt like we witness this amazing friendship form between Amar and Rodrigo in particular, And then as the story goes on, we get those really brutal moments at the end, the ones that really like kind of knife you in the heart, where it's the end of a friendship, but it's the end of an age and the end of an empire in a lot of ways too. And I think for me, that works really well, because there's something for me always in historical fiction in particular. This could be like something set in, 1913 in Europe, or I don't know, pick another time period. But like, as readers, we know what's to come and the characters don't know. So like, we know that this is the end of a thing, and it's never going to come back, and Spain is never going to go back to being that way. It's going to go through hundreds of years of like Catholic Spain and a lack of tolerance, right? And it's there's something so sad about it. And I really like Guy's choice of making Amar also a poet, and really trying to capture the feeling of this place that is now lost to time. I think there's something so beautiful in that.
I think he was actually. I was doing some Wikipedia reading. I think Amar was actually based off on a real person who was a poet.
Yeah, and I think there was a comment here above. Curious your thoughts on the benefit of making this an
Yes,
alternate world. Yeah, so I here's the thing. I
I've
love
got.
historical fiction,
Yeah,
but I also love this because I think it gives you a bit of freedom.
I think it's interesting because I just got done finishing the Kushiel's Legacy series by Jacqueline Carey, and I finished the 6th book, and it was really phenomenal. And I'm going to have a whole review on my channel at some point. But she does something similar. Her books are also alternative history. They lean way more into the fantasy than this does.
Mhm.
Um, but she also kind of has like similar groups, like there's the Yeshuites in those books, who are the analog for Jewish, and there's all sorts of, you can find the analogs for all of medieval history throughout those books. And I kind of like it because it kind of allows you to approach the story and be like, I am familiar with where this author is taking things, right? But it introduces like enough of a remove that you might not necessarily bring all of your prejudices to that reading experiences from your given knowledge, right?
Yeah,
Does that make
and
sense?
yeah, no, sorry. I watched a really quick clip of Kay talking about this in particular,
Hmm.
and kind of the why. And he explained it, and I think it's maybe less obvious in this book because the fantasy element was so little. But he talked about how often, as modern readers, when we read historical fiction, we look down on our characters, right? We think, oh, we're better now. We're better than them. We've
Mm.
advanced so much, whatever. And you can look at a historical character, and in this, religion does certainly play a fairly big part. And you can look and say, oh, that's silly, right? How could they have believed that? But he argued that by making it fantasy, he could make those things that they believed in real. So
Mm.
his example was, if in the world that we're reading about, people believe that fairies exist, but historically we know not true. In his book, he could make that real. And he could say, yeah, they believe in this thing and it's real, right? And it's part of
Hmm.
their world and it's something that they live with every day. And so I think his thinking was that you then remove that ability for us to be prejudiced or kind of looking down on the characters and really connect with them in a more immediate way. And I don't think he's wrong, but I do think it applies differently based on what book we're talking about. Again, because the fantasy elements here are so light,
Hmm.
I think it's a bit harder to make that argument.
Yeah, this definitely felt more like historical fiction with
Yeah,
different names,
yeah. Which doesn't
Heidi,
bother me. Like I get that that's not for
no,
everybody, but it doesn't bother me.
it doesn't me either. Here's Heidi's comment. I love the characters, but some of the writing style really annoyed me, like how the author deliberately misleads you and then it's like, ha, got you. I hated the epilogue. I have to admit, I did not like the epilogue either.
I
Um,
was torn on that when we started talking about it in Discord. I was like, I don't
I
know
did
if I
not
don't like
like it.
it.
I was really frustrated by that. I didn't, it felt like he was trying to be clever,
Mhm.
especially with the whole like, oh, my
Yeah,
wife is a Kindath doctor. I'm like, oh my god,
yeah,
Amar died and he married Johanna. And
yeah.
then it was like, oh wait, actually we've jumped like 15, 20 years into the future at
He's met someone
least.
else.
And this Belmonte that they're talking that's invaded is really Fernan. I
Yeah,
don't know.
I think the epilogue was a bit much.
It
Here's
was
the thing.
heavy handed in my opinion.
I agree. And I think there's another moment earlier on in the book where they're at the carnival and we know that
Oh, the
somebody is
carnival was
lying
really
dead
good.
in the square,
Yeah,
right?
that was
And
really good.
and that's the same kind of thing where you kind of
Yeah,
toy with the audience. We as the reader don't know who's dead and we're following along with that. And that was really successful to me
that was successful for me as well, to be
in the
honest. I
way that
did
the epilogue was not. Though
the
I
card
do like knowing who survived and who didn't.
the the two scenes that will like stick with me, I think forever from reading this book are when one the carnival, the whole carnival was awesome. Like I
So
loved
good. So
that. Like it
fun.
was so good, so fun. Um I like masquerade stuff.
Hmm.
And like I feel like this year I've been able to enjoy like just like tons of masquerade stuff. Like every Jacqueline Carey book has a masquerade. Um
Perfect.
and then this one like was probably my favorite. And that will really stick with me. The way the characters floated, trying to figure out who was under each mask, like all of
Hmm.
that was really great.
Hmm.
And then the other scene that will really stick with me is when they were doing the ambush and she had to like be um pretending to be that woman.
So good. She's like calling from the hills, like
Yeah,
cat
yeah, yeah.
calling. Yeah.
And that really did surprise me because I was thinking that it was just some random woman. Like I had no idea it was Johanna. And then when
Yeah.
that was revealed, that was really cool. So I do think the elements of surprise worked in some instances. Um, I was trying to get to all
Yeah.
these comments. I'm
I
sorry,
know. And
guys.
I'm reading the comments too. And I think for me, the thing about the epilogue, it could have been done differently.
Hmm.
And I think the choice to kill Rodrigo and keep Amar alive is a balance in my head because Amar then represents kind of the last living vestige of this thing that was lost that I feel like the book is really about, right? And Rodrigo's side, his son is going to reunify Spain and they like win, right? So for me, it felt like a bit of a balancing act where,
Hmm.
yes, Rodrigo is slain, but his side is going to win the war and Amar is going to be kind of this man that fades from history a little bit but is the last vestige of this thing. So that all made sense to me.
Yeah,
But
that makes. I was glad in the moment of the battle. I
yeah.
really wanted Damar to win.
Well, and you notice there's a real moment where Guy K he stops referring to them by their names and he starts
Yes,
using he. And I'm like, oh no, here we go.
that's the same thing that
Yeah.
happened, and I have to say I was able to discern that the person that threw the shield was Amar. Like I was pretty sure it was because of the way that one of his perspectives had been written in reference to Johanna. There was
Mm.
something in the way that it referenced Johanna. I was like, I'm pretty sure this is Amar. Um, and then you get to the end of it and it's like kind of unsure, and then it opens up and you think Alvar has married Johanna, and I was like, oh crap, like I was wrong.
It felt a
And then
bit
it
much.
yeah, so like it was a little. I don't think it needed to be that much of a roller coaster, to be honest.
Well, and we could have had an
Um,
epilogue that felt a little bit like the prologue, where it was like about the thing, but like not really about the thing. And it could have given us a detail without actually confirming who had
yeah,
lived and who had died, or it could have maybe led you down a certain path. I don't like ambiguity in my endings, to be honest. Like this happens in K dramas all the time where you're like meant to decide what you want to be the way it ends. And this happened with normal people, which I mean breaks my heart a little bit because I kind of like I get that I can then choose, right? I can choose as a reader what ending, like who died on that battlefield, right? I can choose that. But I don't love it because I feel like I could be wrong. I don't I
mhm.
like when the author is clear about it at the ending, but I do think the epilogue didn't need the mind games. It didn't need those
Yeah,
red herrings.
it
It
was
just could have
just
been done differently and shorter,
it
quite a
was
bit
just a
shorter.
little it was just a little too much. The other I wanted to get Jessica's comments here, or Amy's comments. Just enjoyed the balance of small scale personal storytelling and then the zooming out to show the wider world events. Yeah, there were I there were times when that was more or less successful for me. Like I kind of vacillated a little
And I
bit.
think generally Guy K is picking historical times and places where there are big shifting events happening on a global, like
Hmm.
on a bigger scale that makes it important to do that. It's not like he's panning out just to look at the world around. It's like he's setting his things in important or interesting times for a reason.
Um, uh, I was reading Amy's comment. I think it did a good job of showing that people's personal lives and feelings don't just stop due to these
Yeah.
massive world events. It's all happening and tangled together. Yeah, and I think the fact that like the most of the storytelling was done through the perspective of people who are like important for the politics, but not necessarily like the most important. Like they're not
Yeah.
kings and stuff themselves. Like
Yeah.
they're kind of the people doing the work of the kings in a lot of ways.
Mhm. Mhm.
So Or so by the end, I don't know if 100% buy why they couldn't stay friends. The allegiances were muted by then. Yeah, I kind of agreed. I have to say, like, where the book kind of lost me a little bit in the end was, and this is the thing, like, sometimes I wonder if, like, maybe I'm just not smart enough for some things, and, like, if I had read it more carefully, I would have noticed. But I really did not understand why Amar turned down the offer. Like,
Yeah, and
I was like, this just doesn't
I
really.
think I think that that's like what Zane's kind of getting to though. Like it felt like because we've spent all this time with the three of them and knowing how important they are to each other as individuals, it seems insane that he would turn that down, right? And
Yeah.
eventually knowing, and he knows at that point, I'm pretty sure that he's going to be named the next like leader of the asteroid army. He knows that they're going to be head to head, but at the same time, I think he understands there's lots of commentary kind of throughout the book about the way that the Jadites operate, their intolerance, and he knows what's coming. He knows it's the end of this thing that he believes in so strongly. And he also, I think, just can't be a part of this new, like, United Esperania that's just, I just don't think he can. Like, he's a man of, like, it's funny because there's commentary throughout the book where he's killed two kings, two equivalent kings.
Yeah.
Right? Like he is a man who will kill and a man who will do things that perhaps other people find distasteful, but he does it for a principled reason. Like he has reasons, right? That make sense to him. It's part
Yeah.
of his worldview. And I don't know. I think if you're like put this back into real world context, if you're like, you go and have this mercenary winter with some people that you just met and you're on different sides of religious belief in the 15th or 16th century,
Yeah.
and are you suddenly going to go and fight for the other side? I think that's a hard pill to swallow. Like, I agree in the context of the book. I
Mhm.
don't know that it was laid out perfectly, but I do understand why he and I think that's what's the heartbreaking part about it, right? Like, that's what it's meant to be. We're working towards like showing how these people can be the best of friends and how they can be like family to each other. But they're swept up in these larger kind of political/religious movements. And at what point do you abandon your principles or stick with them? And I think Amar sticks with his.
Yeah, he does. Amar for me was one of the more um he's the character I probably come away from respecting in a lot of ways the
Mhm.
most, which is
Yeah.
odd given I don't know, some
If
of his
anything, I
actions,
wanted
but
Rodrigo to switch sides. Like,
yeah, I
do you
didn't.
know what I mean? Like that would feel more real
It's like
to
in
me.
some ways it was hard because I kept going back to the fact that I really did not like Al Malik the second
Right. Yeah. No,
at all.
he's,
Huh?
yeah, no, just, and I don't think you're supposed to, right?
No, but I didn't love the Vayedan king either,
Hmm.
but I liked him more than I did the, guy. So it was I kept trying to think, like, who do I want these people to ultimately side with? And really, they never ultimately side with anybody. I mean, in the end, the people that survive are living in that, Kendeth city,
Yeah.
kind of not removed from the politics, obviously, but definitely more so than others. I mean, it takes a month for them to learn that
To
the
learn.
peninsula has fallen.
Yeah. And I'm just seeing
Um,
Amy's comment at the very bottom there, Chris.
yes.
He's fighting for the love of his country that he's already acknowledged doesn't really exist anymore, but he loves the memory of it so much. And I think that's Guy K includes quite a bit of poetry throughout all of his books. He tends to
Mhm.
have poet figures and includes bits of poetry. A lot of them I'm not super captured by, but he has that Amar delivers that one thing at the end about
Yeah.
memory, right? And losing those things. And it's interesting to me because I think it's the Alfontina in the book that it's like the Alhambra
Yeah.
reference, right? And you have that great piece of music, Memories of the Alhambra. Like it's such a part of Spanish history, this Moorish history of Spain that, like we haven't really forgotten about this place, right? Like I think Amar as a human would love that, people still think of this and visit those places and understand that something was lost there. But Yeah,
Was
it just felt so like historically important, relevant that he was like this.
I would say memory is also a theme that type of what exactly what Amy's talking about is also a theme that's touched upon quite a bit in Tigana as
Hmm.
well.
Yeah, for sure. Because in
Um,
Tigana, like the
Probably
name of
more
the
so.
place is wiped
Yeah.
out. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I it's like the more we talk about it, actually, the more I liked it. Um, which is a kind of interesting thing. Like the more you talk about it, you kind of realize like all the really smart things that were happening. It's really good. I guess I find so. For example, one of the things I really struggled with, and it wasn't like it was towards the end as we're kind of like building up to this fight between Rodrigo and Amar. You get like a 10-page info dump
Hmm.
about like the war and like what happens from when they leave each other to when they got to have this final showdown, right?
Yeah. Because time
And
has to
that
pass.
to me, but there were several instances of that in the book, I
Yeah.
felt like,
Yeah.
where we were just like given like, okay, we got to catch you up. And that for me really broke up the storytelling,
Hmm.
really broke up my emotional connection. Like I read that and I was so bored. Like I have to admit, like those 10 pages were a struggle. I was sort of like, okay, come on, like, especially because
I,
most of it was told from the perspective of, like, Ben Avrin, the
yeah.
Kindeth, counselor,
Yeah.
and a couple other people in the Mujwadis,
Yeah.
and I'm like, "I don't care about these people." So, like, not only are you info dumping, but you're choosing the most boring, like, don't care about them people in the whole book, that I have no psychological or emotional connection to, like, deliver this info dump. And there were just points in the book for me where I just felt like I felt nothing when I probably should have felt something. Does that
Yeah,
make
and I
sense?
I wonder too because it's funny because I do think if you're used to dealing with one of our three main characters and you're having lots of chapters where they're interacting with each other or it's from their perspectives and then all of a sudden we jump out of that, we need to hit the fast forward button, right? Like if this is a movie, we
Mhm.
need to fast forward 10 minutes so that we understand that when they come together on this field, like this is not the next day. We need to show
Yes.
the passage of time somehow. And I don't know how you do that without doing it like this, because if it's still from their perspective, it's a bit, I think it takes a bit of the emotional punch out. Like I like removing it, but I agree that it does take you out of the story. It does kind of remove you from the immediacy of that like night where they're arguing about what side, like what's going to happen to the
Yeah.
three of them, right? Because then it's like that's over, we need to fast forward and then get to the point where this battle makes sense, like plot wise we need it to make sense that these two huge armies are now fighting each other because they need time to get like logistically to get places. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
agree, I don't disagree with you. I'm not sure how else you do it that's better, maybe from a single perspective. And maybe it's one of those things, it's like kind of the Greek chorus where that perspective is used throughout the book to fast forward these
Mhm.
moments and it's the same person. Like is it Diego that's actually like narrating all this or is it Miranda? Can we finally give her some more to talk about? um I don't know how else you do it, but I agree that it
Mhm.
takes you out of the kind of emotional arc of the characters that we're focused on.
Well, I don't like time jumps in general in books. Like that is something
Yeah.
that I do not like. It's a storytelling device that instantly puts me off, and I find it's very rare for me to find a book where it's done, and I think to
Hmm.
myself, "Oh, I'm glad they jumped time instead of I would have almost rather they just show me the story between that period of
Right.
time."
Right.
And I understand logistically for time constraints and books and page counts and what you're trying to accomplish through your story, that's not always possible, but that's always the feeling I'm left with.
Hmm.
Um, and I guess I was the same here. And in addition, I found the actual like way it was kind of info dumped, even like the letter between Ben Avrin and the Murjwadi, like all of that. I was
Hmm.
just like, I'm so bored. By this.
Which is
um,
interesting because to back this up, I remember when we all started reading the book, the first like quarter whatever Discord chat that we were having, we were all talking about, and I was reminded of it, how quickly Kay as an author is able to make you care desperately about a person, right? His ability to pack in character development in a really short period of time is got to be one of the most impressive like witchcrafty type things I've seen in writing. I think he's able to like develop things so quickly. And so it's interesting to then have the alternate where he's able to develop characters that quickly, but when we need a time jump or we need like a plot to progress very quickly for it to make sense, it's not as successful. Because that was the
well,
thing we all noted at the beginning was like you know who Miranda is, Like you have a full
Yes,
picture of Miranda.
that opening of Miranda was awesome. That
Yeah.
was really good. Um, I was thinking like, oh, she's gonna take him hostage or something like that, but she just kills him. And it's like, yes,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
um,
And there are a
so
couple secondary characters, right? There's in the ambush scene, you get the perspective of that other like captain.
uh,
Um,
the outlaw.
yeah,
Oh no,
right?
you're talking
Like
about the captain, the one that was taking the gold. He had
both.
collected
I
the
think you
gold.
get a
Yeah,
whole
you get
bunch of
both of them.
like new perspectives, and all of a
Yeah,
sudden you sort of super care about these people who are in this ambush. And then again, this is that moment before you realize who's up in the hills, like setting the
yeah.
trap kind of thing, right? Like I think he does have this way of telling you who people are and making you understand what kind of person they are very quickly, which is
This
how you get dropped into the story so easily.
this could very easily be like a mini series,
Oh yeah, for
like
sure.
a 10-episode miniseries,
Yeah.
like very easily. And I think some of the storytelling would be pretty well good to see on camera like that.
Hmm.
The
I agree.
other area, and I felt this way with Tagana as well. Um, that's not as successful for me. I like Guy Gabriel Kay's writing. Don't get
Hmm.
me wrong. Like it's good. There's no getting around the fact that it's good writing, right? Like I mean, you can't read it and be like, "Oh, that's bad."
Yeah.
I don't feel like he visually brings the world to life for me in a lot of ways.
It,
Um,
it's so funny talking about this because we have talked
yeah.
in the past about like genre shorthands, right?
Mhm.
We talk about it specifically. I think it came up through one of our sci-fi talks and maybe also with some fantasy talks where you drop me into a sci-fi universe and I bring with me a whole bunch of pre-existing like visual cues or
Mhm.
understanding about what I think that world looks like. Now, it doesn't mean that that's what the author thinks that world looks like, but I bring all this baggage with me to a thing that I have read, right? And so in this book and in a lot of his stuff, like I'm going to bring with me everything that I know about European medieval history
Mm.
and pre-populate the world with what I know things to look and feel like, which again may not be accurate, but it makes me as a reader not consider what's on the page versus what's in my brain. And this happens to me in a number of different books, and this is definitely one of them.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that I'm somebody who really values those types of like nature descriptions
Right.
and environmental descriptions and stuff like that. And even like descriptions of people's clothing and stuff like that. Like I really want all of that. And
Right.
you don't
You don't get a ton
really
of it.
get it here. You know what I'm
No.
saying? Like at all.
Yeah.
Um and for me, I wish it had more of that, I think.
Yeah,
I
and
think
it's
I think it would make it feel more it would make it feel more immersive to me
yeah.
and more like I'm falling into an experience rather than learning about something in some ways because that's kind of how I felt sometimes when I
Yeah.
was reading this book.
Yeah, and it's funny how it's something that I don't often consider, but I would love to go back and read I mean his other books for sure, but also I'm thinking just like general historical fiction
Mhm.
and really try to like literally parse out what scenes are describing the period dress, what scenes are describing what
Mm.
the city looks like, because I wonder how much it's done, especially in periods that are covered a lot. Like if I was going to
Mhm.
read historical fiction about Tudor England, how much does the author need to put on the page for me to understand what people look like and the places they inhabit because it's so overdone? Same with World War II fiction. Like, how much of that is just like you expect your audience to bring that with you? Now, in this case, I don't know that this period in Spanish history is something that people are bringing a lot
Mhm.
to the table with. So it's not an out, but I would have to like purposely read a book with that in mind and see if I could parse how much are the authors putting on the page versus what am I just assuming is correct.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree.
That's
Sorry,
the
I'm
thing,
writing
Amy,
some
and it
notes.
tricks you, right? Because like I as a reader, I don't often consider that. I pre-populate places and times with my understanding of things. So it's funny how in this book, I have a solid understanding of medieval European history. When I started reading Under Heaven and River of Stars, which are set in China, I didn't I don't have that same understanding of things, and those books were less successful to me. So I think part of it is just like your comfort and familiarity. He also has like a Viking novel, and I was like, I don't know, right? So it's
Is it The Last Light of the Sun?
yeah, yeah, which I want to reread, but
yeah, when you agreed, Zan. When I think about how fast some of it goes
mhm.
like how fast some of this moves. Like I got to the end of this book and I was like, there was a crap ton that happened in this book, and yeah, I never felt like it was rushed, and I never felt even like I would call this book like action packed or anything like that. But there's a ton that happens.
Which is so funny to me because I remember when I was rereading the Sarantine Mosaic, the first one's Sailing to Sarantium.
Hmm.
That whole book, like the main character journeys to like the Constantinople equivalent. And I remember getting to the end of the book, it's like 500 pages or whatever, and it's been like literally 1 or 2 nights and
Wow.
that's it, right? So he does this weird, there's like some weird time dilation that happens in his book where either we get a ton of stuff happen and you're like, holy crap, it's been a chapter and look at all this stuff that's happened, or it's the reverse of like you feel like you've been in this world for months or years and it's been a couple of days. It's there's some sort of weird writing witchcraft that he's able to deploy here.
Interesting. Um. Yeah, I had a
Yeah,
thought and
Zan,
it
I
just
agree.
escaped me.
The everyday stuff, right? Like we get caught so swept up in this being a story about individual people and about personal relationships set against the
Yeah.
backdrop of something epic. And so, when the country's about to get conquered, I guess you don't really have time to care about like the day-to-day crap. But I would spend 8 books in this world and learn about all that too, right? He sort of kind of forces himself to choose a narrative style, a narrative structure, and stick with it because he's only got one book to do it in. Which, I mean, he didn't have to do it that way. He could have done it a different way for sure.
Hmm. Um. Now, his Sailing to Sarantium book, that's set in the same world, right?
Yes.
Just a different, obviously, country.
Yeah, it's about like a mosaicist who gets hired to go to I'm going to use the real world equivalents. Gets hired to go to Constantinople in like the 6th century, and by Justinian and Theodora equivalents in terms of emperors and empresses, and he gets hired to do the mosaic on this giant new church that's being built.
Hmm.
And there's the oh god, what is it called? There's the riots that happen at the Hippodrome. Like that's part of the book. Like it's all really inspired by things
I,
that felt very like obvious
when
and real to me.
when I tell you I know nothing about that time period, I don't think I could tell you where Constantinople was on the map.
I mean, it's the point where the two continents touch for a tiny little piece. Like Europe and Asia, Turkey, Istanbul, it's the same place. Okay.
All right, I take your word on it
This
as
is
a history major.
this is what I mean though, right? Like as a reader, I don't put a lot of pressure on the author to build the worlds for me.
Hmm.
But if you, like I said about the China books, if you don't know anything about these places or the time period, like are you just left out in the wilderness? I think maybe a little bit.
Yeah, I am going to read more of his books. I own a ton. I own the Fiona of Our Tapestry. I own Isabel, A Song for Our Bone, Under Heaven, Sailing to Sarantium, and this one, obviously.
I think the
So
Sarantine Mosaic is probably one of my favorites of all time.
I'm really wanting to read Under Heaven, to be honest. It's
I mean,
calling to me.
I want to reread it. So between we're gonna have to reread that. We've got to get to Hex. Chris and I are apparently also buddy reading Dune now,
I
and
know. I've been talked into it.
yeah, it's I don't know. I'll get to it at some point. I think Guy K's books all feel similar, and I wonder if some of the stuff that irked you about this book you would find irksome in others as well. And he's just one of those, like, he has a certain style, and if it works for you, I think it really works, and if it doesn't work for you, it maybe doesn't.
Well, one thing
Every
too is I was
style.
reading this quickly
Yeah,
because I was trying to get it done for book club, and I had
yeah.
gone on vacation where I didn't read as much as I was wanting to, and then I had job stuff happening, and so I was reading this relatively quickly during a fairly stressful like period of time, and so would it have been better for me had I read it slowly at my own pace, that type of thing, and
Yeah.
allowed myself maybe in some of these moments where I was like, "Oh, get to the point," um, or
It's
like
because
show
you're
me a view
stressed
playing
about
character
getting
I
to the
want. Like
point.
maybe
Yeah.
maybe it was because of my headspace, right? I mean, you can't divorce that. So it'll be. I'm going to try one of his other books, kind of in a very relaxed reading type of mood.
Yeah. But that's so true of like literally anything, right? We've talked so many times in this book club in particular about how reading for book club alters my perspective because I pace books differently for book
Yes.
club. I think about like, okay, now I've got to talk about it for an hour. So it's always a different vibe, but that happens to us with every book we read ever, right? That we're
Yeah.
just so subject to what else is happening in our lives when we happen to be reading it.
I agree, Zan. This definitely. I mean, I DNF'd to Ghana, to be honest.
Yeah. That's where we started from when we were doing book selection
Yeah,
was let's try
about
something
halfway
else.
through, I gave up on Tigana. And this one I read, and like I said, even though I have critiques of it and there were elements of it that didn't work, I think this was the one where I read it. I was like, okay, I can see what people
Yep.
love about GGK now.
Yep.
I read this.
Oh geez. I read the first Wheel of Time and I will never
guess
go back, I don't think.
guess what I did. Okay.
I know you did.
I recently sold back all my Wheel of Time books to Half Price Books. And then the new trailer came out
It's a
for the
good
show.
trailer. It's a really good trailer.
It's a really good trailer. Like,
Yeah.
I have to admit that was a like, wow, someone on the
Mhm.
Amazon marketing team deserves some money.
Yep.
Um and so I went out.
Chris, you're a
And I'm
menace.
just going to reread the first one in preparation for the show because I do actually like the first book. And okay, this is going into a little bit of a weird Wheel of Time tangent, but
It's all right.
something odd for any wheelies out there. I got this new book. It's a new reprint from Tor Books with a little horrid sticker on it, right? It's got a different first chapter. The first chapter of the book is different than the first chapter in previous printings. And at first I thought I was like crazy. I was like, there's no way. Like, I remember how this book opens up. It opens up on this really intense prologue. And actually it opens up now on a like 20-page chapter called Earlier Ravens that's told from the perspective of Egwene.
But why though?
I have no idea. And it's not like
And who
somebody
wrote
else.
it?
He did. Because it doesn't have any other author listed on here. It's just like a
Like,
different
was it
opening.
re-edited?
I have no idea. Like, if the first book opens up, I'm telling if you go to old editions, it
That's so
opens
weird.
up on the big prologue between Luthor and Telemann and the other dude, and like having this big showdown in a castle. It now opens up in the Two Rivers from Egwene's perspective.
And then is chapter 2 the old chapter 1?
And then it's the prologue. Yeah, it goes earlier, prologue, chapter 1.
Huh.
Anyway,
It's funny. I'm
let
never
people
going to
know.
read it, but I'm so excited to watch the series. Like, I'm happy to experience that world through this Amazon series instead of reading it, which
Yeah,
is so weird for me.
probably best. Probably best because
Yeah, you know what? I think the trailer took us all a little bit by surprise. Like, I saw that the Wheel of Time trailer had come out, and you get like the still image, right? And I was like, there were people reacting to it and whatever. And I was like, okay. And I watched the trailer because I watched the trailer, and I was like, I remember nothing about this book. Like, nothing about this trailer reminds me of what I remember reading, which is very little. Um, and yet, I'm like, okay, so I guess we're all watching this now. So good. But I felt that way about the Dune trailer too, right? Like, was I that interested in Dune? Like, love Timothy Chalamet, but like, eh. And then I saw the trailer and I was like, oh boy, here we go.
yeah, I saw the trailer and I was very excited, and I had to watch it in theaters. And so,
Me too.
the first movie I've been to the theaters for in a long time.
Can I just like hang on? Can I disagree on like literally everything? Which is amazing that we are able to select books for book club together. Because it's hilarious. Hang on, I'm trying to scroll back in our conversation. I don't know if I'll be able to find it. Oh my gosh, hang on.
This was funny.
It was like the thing. Okay, so Chris sent me a picture of the new Guy K cover. for his upcoming book, All the Seas of the World, is coming out next year, and he sent me like the cover. And then I was like, my heart just can't handle it. I saw Dune last night. I'm all over the place with my feelings. Chris, did you like it? Me, maybe one of the best movies I've ever seen. It was for me perfection. Chris, I hated it. Lol. Me, sounds about right. And then we had this whole conversation about how you didn't actually hate the whole movie.
No,
You
I
hated the
didn't.
plot, the way the
I
plot
hated
was
the plot.
depicted.
The film, if I was somebody who approached movies from the perspective of like, I want beautiful shots, I want fantastic acting, you know, I'm trying to say I would have
I
loved it, right?
mean,
It's like
one of
it
the
was
best things I've ever
best
seen.
things I've ever seen, right?
Yeah, easily.
The score, a
Oh,
little heavy-handed at times, but fantastic.
but like the best use of bagpipes in a film score
Oh my god,
ever.
that was so funny when they came out with the bagpipes.
Jeez, the bagpipes were so good.
I thought the story was shit.
I think the way
Real
that they chose to
bad.
tell the story was not good, and that's why we're reading the book. Because I
Yeah.
also I bought myself a copy, and like I never do this, but I bought the film tie-in edition. One, because it was the most readily available, but two, because I actually am like obsessed with the film as
Mhm.
like a work of art. I think it was like the set design, the production design. I have never seen a better sci-fi movie and gotten a feel for the scale of space and what these civilizations would look like than I have with Dune. It was
Yeah.
stunning. And the
I
acting, like you said, all amazing.
okay. One thing that really bugged me about the movie
See, and
that I
that's
just
what I
gotta
said
get
too.
out. The Harkonnens.
Mm-hmm.
Why I felt like, and maybe this is me like being like very overly sensitive, but I was so annoyed with how much it was like these people are evil. The way you can tell these people are evil is because their leader is grotesquely fat. Like,
Yeah.
look at his body in a sauna. Look at his body being dipped in mud.
Yep.
Look at him eating disgustingly.
Yep.
Look at
It's
the
very
juxtaposition
outdated.
between his fat, grotesque body eating sloppily, disgustingly next to Isaac Oscar, like built like a
Draped
bronze
beautifully
god, draped
naked.
beautifully naked. Like, it bugged me so much, and I was like, "This is like." The movie, I'm not gonna spoil anything, but it makes a very big deal of the fact that like um the Harkonnens are like evil people that like
Mhm.
all this different stuff. But then like you never see them do anything that evil.
I mean, that scene where they've got a whole bunch of dead people hung upside down with the rivers of blood so that they can oh, is that the other? Oh, that was the army, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That was the
I mean, like
Imperial Army.
you see them like invade. Like you're told at the beginning, like, oh, they've been brutal to my people. You get like 5 minute info dump, which like thank God the film included a 5 minute info dump, without which you would have no context for anything in the movie. Um where you're like told that like they've been brutal to the Fremen and all this different stuff. But
Yeah.
I feel like the movie would have been more successful if it had actually shown some of that. Like you could have
Yeah.
like told like shown me them being evil to like people instead of like almost all of their villainy being communicated to me
Yeah.
via the fatness of their leader. Like
And I
that
mean,
really
that's the
annoyed
problem
me.
with the book or the adaptation in general, I think, is that everybody has said to me for the longest time, Dune is all about politics, it's about religion in some ways, and it's extremely complicated and whatever. And I think when you adapt that, I think what happened is that instead of focusing on plot detail, they focused on building characters, which I'm never mad about. But if you haven't read the book or don't know that the book has got all this other stuff backing it, some of the motivations for the people and the like great houses didn't make a whole lot of sense. And I think Amy's point
That
up
yeah.
there, was it Amy? Somebody said too, like that, oh yeah, the fact that they weren't guaranteed a second movie when they made the first makes that ending
I
brutal,
know.
right? Just
I
completely bizarre.
I kept as the film, like as you know, there was a certain sense that like things were wrapping up largely because I was looking at the time, being like, oh my god,
Yeah,
it's
we must
10:30.
be getting
Like
close.
we
Yeah.
must be getting close to the end. I was like, it's ending? Like what is happening? Like
Mhm.
um that like I don't know. And the acting was great. The thing that bugged me the most that it gave very little like about the political houses. Like
Yep.
everyone talks about Dune as this like political epic
Yep.
sci-fi,
Yep.
and then like I learned
we
no
skim over.
motivations. I don't
Yeah.
know anything about House Atreides outside the fact
It's
that
like
like she seemed
Atreides
like
good,
decent.
Harkonnen bad. Like
Yeah, yeah.
there's not a lot of anything in between. And there were again certainly moments, like character moments that I thought were really impactful. And again, everybody just looks so stunning in that thing. Like
Yeah, they do.
the costuming and everything was just like there was so much world building done through set design and costume
Yeah,
where I was like,
the
I feel like this is perfection.
the costuming, the people with like the things over their heads, like the
Yeah,
domey things, those are so cool.
yeah,
Like it was one of those films that you could kind of visually, it did a lot visually to kind of imbue this sense of like mysticism into the world,
yeah,
which I really appreciated. But it was a
yeah.
bit,
And I think that's one of the I was reading reading a couple articles afterwards, right? It's probably going to be a front runner for most Oscar nominations ever. Hilariously, not ever for the actors, but for all of the other stuff. And then
mhm.
a couple other articles talking about how like Dune Part 2 is got a lot to make up in terms of explaining why
People who have
things happen.
people who have read the books. Does the first book end like that? Like, is that the
No, it's
first?
like 2/3 through the first book is
Okay,
where the film ends. I did a quick skim and
okay,
I feel like he's walking into the desert kind of 60 to 70%, 60 65% through the
okay.
first book. But somebody correct me if I'm wrong because I haven't read it
Because
yet.
that ending for me was just like the most like what the heck type of moment. Also, let me just say they straight up used Zendaya for so much marketing, like
So much. She's
everything.
like beside Timothy for everything. And I'm like, she's
She's in
not in
that
the
film
movie.
for like 5 minutes at the very end.
Yeah.
Like I kept thinking, like, oh, she's gonna play this huge important role.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure
And
she
I
will
think
in
Tim
part two, but
clearly she is very important to him and like what happens to him. But
yeah,
I think like to Matt's point, it felt like half a movie. And it's a shame with things like this that, it got delayed, but we're looking at, I think, a 2023 release of a
mm,
Dune Part 2 potentially. Like it's hard when we have these huge gaps in between because I don't want people to rush through their storytelling to pack all of Dune into a single movie.
yeah,
But yeah, no, we're gonna skip the David Lynch. I'm just gonna
yeah.
skip it. I'm just gonna
I
wait.
was just thinking that it's on HBO Max.
Yeah, yeah, no. Um, it's unfortunate, right? Because I think this will stand up better depending on how they handle part two. Because again, it's not a perfect. Like for me, it was perfect in a lot of ways and clearly imperfect in others. And I don't know if that will get corrected in a part two. Maybe not, right? Like maybe that's just one of the downfalls of the film. But like to be able to watch the entire epic thing in one go, if you want to, like I feel like it's going to be a different experience.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And I guess I saw someone like tweeted out like a list of like scenes that like they deleted, and
Wrong.
like
I was not prepared. Sorry, Chris.
um and like all of the scenes that they mentioned that they deleted, I was like, why did you delete that? Like
Yeah,
that would have
because it's
explained so much. That
plot
would have given,
explainer.
yeah, that would have given a lot more like details for like some of what was going on. So yeah, I
Yeah.
am interested
I
in
do
reading the
think
book. I've
I
got
do
it.
think too. Oh yeah, see that was the cover. I was going to get that one, and they're both mass market anyway.
Well, this is trade paperback.
Is it? It looks like mine's like premium mass market.
I
The
can't do
tall
the
ones that I
I
hate them.
hate that's how the new Wheel of Time is this
I hate
like
premium mass market. Yeah.
tall mass market and I hate it.
Yeah. Um,
So
hang on. Sorry. To
um
Zan's point, real quick. I think it's 70%. There's not much left in the first book. I think Dune Part
wow.
Two, the movie, is covering the other bit of Dune and also Dune Messiah. Like it's supposed to
Okay.
cover out Paul's run, is the way I understand it. Because I think the Messiah part is kind of like the rest of what we have to talk about, right? He's going to do like the rocky training grounds in the desert and then go and conquer the world or the
um
universe.
what was I gonna say? It's all gone. Oh,
Sorry.
something I think is kind of interesting is I'm really eager to read the book and learn more about the Bene Gesserit because
Mm-hmm.
that was kind of my favorite part of the movie, to be honest.
Yeah.
And like it's interesting because I'm pretty certain that from what I saw of the Bene Gesserit in the film, that they probably inspired the Aes Sedai in the Wheel of Time.
Mm-hmm.
Just from the way they were shown and described, I was like, I bet Jordan got his inspiration for the Aes Sedai from the Bene Gesserit.
Right. That makes sense to me based on what I know of both, which is not a
Mhm.
lot, but like that seems logical. That's the thing. I think there's so many little hints of like what could be great here, and I have never tried to make a film. I
Mhm.
don't know how you accomplish some of these things without it being info dumpy. And like we were talking about with the guy K, right? Like interrupting character arcs to explain the world. But there's like one little scene takeaway to explain that his mother is like part of this and like what their role is in imperial politics. Like we get a throwaway line almost about how they are like behind all the imperial machinations, but
Mhm.
like that's it.
Sorry, I'm trying to keep up with comments, guys.
I know people have
I know,
feelings
well,
about
there's
this.
a lot. Okay. Okay, best scene was not included in the movie. I'll be interested when I read the book if I know what scene you were talking about, Zan. They say Messiah is more after the fact, so maybe not necessarily.
Yeah, I think they might do. It sounded like they were going to try to just like squish what they could in, like not like follow it line by line, but kind of use
This.
bits of it.
I was also, when I was watching the movie, being like, I bet you Jordan got inspiration for the Aiel from the Fremen. I was thinking the exact thing. Um, the science are super. Yeah, like, as I was like, I was really describing it. I was like, oh, these are definitely. This is definitely Ice Sedai. Okay, well, there's so okay. I mean, it's the greatest sci-fi novel of all time. I need to quit being such a baby. And just because I didn't like the movie doesn't mean. I was so mad after I watched that movie. And my dad and I were disagreeing because my dad's read the book. He kept being like, "Well, if you've read the book, blah blah." I'm like, "No,"
We shouldn't
because a
have to have read
film,
the book.
yeah, a film should stand on its own merits.
I
Okay,
agree.
like it should not like require homework. Um,
And yet I make homework for myself all the time with this kind of crap.
So then I was like, so at the end of it, my dad was like, "Oh, I really want to reread that book," and I had brought my copy of the book with me when I was visiting him because we went to go see the movie together. And I was like, "Well, you can have it because I'm not reading it." And then like today, I came back, I was like, "Actually, I'm gonna need that back." My friend and I talked. We're about reading that.
Just because I want to get as much out of it. Like I think for me, again, I knew the very high level, roughly this is what Dune is about, but nothing particular about it, right? And going to see the movie, there's enough in the movie that I'm like, I can see how this would be backed up by a book that I could really love.
Yeah,
And partly because I'm transposing the casting and the world building that I saw on screen into the movie or into the book in a way that I think a lot of people have to go the other way, right? People
it's
that are
funny
fans of Dune.
because I play a lot of board games, and there's a really famous new board game came out this year called Dune Imperium, which is obviously based on the movie Dune. Well, it's based on it like is from the books, but they like included the movie artwork for everything.
Oh, so stunning.
Yeah, it's stunning, right? That board game has more world building and
Than
a
the film.
better understanding of the film, like than if you watched the film. Like it was hilarious, right? Um, like you have a better understanding for like what resources are valuable and stuff like that than you do from watching the film. I never knew much about Dune outside of outside of like certain like key buzz phrases like fear is the mind killer, and like the
The
spice must
sandworms.
flow. You know,
Yeah,
those are the
right?
things I knew about it. Also, for a movie that like the whole point about the spice, I felt
We
like
don't
I
know
had
about any of the mechanics.
I you learned so little. Not only I felt like I learned so little about like the mechanics of how the spice works, but also like so little about like the consequences of the fact that
Yeah.
they can't get spice production up and going, right? Like,
Yeah, no, it's one of those like I think we get a couple scenes of Paul who is reacting to it when he arrives.
mhm.
But in terms of like the science fiction mechanics of how this universe works, and it's very like mycelial network Star Trek Discovery kind of vibes. Like they're clearly pulling from Dune when they were looking at this, but like I know that because I talked to somebody about how this works. But like, yeah, the ramifications of the spice trade beyond the house, like House Atreides or House Arcona, whatever, not making money, we don't really understand
Yeah,
the real implications of that.
I kept being like, wait, like what are the I mean, obviously there seems to be more implications for it. It was a beautiful movie, and I think maybe if I read the book and then watch the film, I'll have a different experience of it.
I
Maybe
think I
one
will end up
more
loving the thing.
similar to what my dad had.
Yeah.
Um,
I love that we just tacked on like a 15-minute Dune discussion.
Listen, we had to delay a week. We needed a little time.
Well, and you know what? Like, we're gonna read Hex next, but then
Yes,
we're
I'm
back to
scared.
sci-fi in December, and
Oh
so I
yes,
would not be surprised if we maybe revisited the Dune chat a little
yeah. I
bit
would not be
in the
surprised either.
December live show,
I
because
am.
hopefully we'll have read it by then.
I'm planning on making December my sci-fi month because I've got
All right.
several books that I need to read for sci-fi. So I've got the newest Becky Chambers, which
Mm-hmm.
earlier in the year I read like halfway through. Loved, loved, loved. And then like I
Yeah.
was so slumpy, and it was around the time that like I was moving down to Indy, and then something horrible happened, and my like brain was not ready for like reading, and I gave up reading for like a month. And so I really want to go back and visit it now that I'm in like a good headspace.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've also got I tried to listen to the audiobook of Leviathan Wakes
Mm-hmm.
years ago. I went to Gen Con, and there was it was the year that James S. A. Corey was the guest of honor, and they were awesome. They were so cool. Guest of honor for the Writers Symposium. And so like that summer, like after I went to that Gen Con that year, I tried to listen to their book on audio, and I really didn't like it. But then I was at a friend's house that I've not seen since before the pandemic. And I was raiding their bookshelves, and they had a copy of it. And I was like, can I borrow this? And just like, try to say. Um, and so it's like, let me just borrow this. And so I started reading it physically, and I read the first couple chapters physically, and I liked it a lot more physically. So I'm going to try that one.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Amy is asking if the Becky Chambers was the Psalm for the Wild Built. No, it was the Galaxy and the Ground Within.
Oh, so that's a little older.
Yeah, a little bit older. I guess it's not her newest.
Because Song for the Wild Built is separate and
Yeah,
very short.
it's a novella.
Yeah.
Um, and then I've also got a couple other sci-fi books I'm forgetting already that I want to read. Yeah, I'd be very curious to know like how much Dune sales have gone up.
I think huge.
Oh, it's
My
got to
guess
be
is huge.
insane.
And I think, part of it is going to be people like me for sure who have like kind of always meant to read Dune, but are a
Hmm.
little bit unsure about classic sci-fi because there's a lot of bad classic sci-fi, and just never made time for it. Not that I wasn't interested, but just never made a point of reading it. And especially because it's long, it also kind of put me off. And this has kind of been the kick in the teeth to do it finally.
Well,
So I
how
wonder
many?
if there's a bunch of us like that.
Well, how many people picked up The Lord of the Rings for the first time because of the movies?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yep. Totally.
that was my family. My family had never read The Lord of the Rings, and they grew up when there was like the Lord of the Rings craze. My parents.
Right. Yeah.
Um, and we like watched the movie randomly because my dad went to. This is back in the days when oh, you had to go to the video store to watch a movie. So he went to the family video down the road to pick up a movie, and they didn't have the movie we were looking for. So he called. He's like, "Hey, can I pick up this movie instead? Because I saw a good review for it in USA Today." And we watched it. We had no idea that it was like the first part of a trilogy or anything. So we like got to the end of that first movie, and we were like, "Oh, pause it. We need to get snacks for the rest of this thing." And
Yeah.
like we were expecting them to like throw the ring into Mordor, and we turned it back on. It was like the end of the movie. But anyway, the point is, like, we immediately went out and bought the books. Like,
Yeah.
and like that was I was like 6 years old, and like I had to read them. And like it was just insane.
Yeah. It's one of those I think that happens like Ron's saying, right? They sell Dune in supermarkets. It's
Yeah,
Dune is everywhere. And it's one
everywhere.
of those movies too, I think that certainly like the people that I went to see with, like, we are in the sci-fi thing. Like we are
Yeah,
in that business. But I know lots of people who are like, somewhat interested in Dune at least just to see it because they've heard what it looks like what it feels like in theaters.
Amy is asking if any Anne Leckie is on the list. It's not, tragically. I mean, one of these days I need to actually give it was
You need to get
Imperial
rid of,
Rockets.
yeah. Well, you have
Um,
to get back into the ancillary series
yeah, the ancillary series. That
and
was
let
the one
go
I
of
was
the
thinking
Raven
of.
Tower.
Yeah, I did not like the Raven. um,
Oh yeah, Matt, I started it. Like when I bought my copy, I started Dune and it was very easy to read. I've
yeah, I
only
read
read a
the
couple
first
chapters.
chapter, and it was not difficult to read. I was
Yeah.
expecting it to be super dense. You know what I mean? Because that's the thing everyone talks about. Is like how hard it is to get through. But actually, it wasn't like that at all.
No.
And then Zan says it's more of a fantasy writing style. That helps a lot. Well, did you read Empire of Silence, Jessica?
No.
I'd be curious if you would like that one, because I I didn't love it, to be honest, but I think that's actually a point in favor for you liking it. Um,
If you hated it, I'm sure to love it.
but in terms of like science fiction that reads like fantasy, like that's how that book was,
Hmm.
and it had a
See, and it's funny
very
because I also love science fiction that reads like the Yunha Lee series,
mm,
the oh gosh, Machineries of Empire. Is that what that series
yes,
is called?
very good memory. I
It
knew
is
the person. Yeah.
extremely hard sci-fi, right? Like it is, your mind will be blown at how much you don't understand. And I also thought those were all 5-star books.
Can I tell you like a reason I've been like, and this is so unfair to the book that I'm put off reading that? I was visiting Ohio, family in Ohio, and I went to the Barnes and Noble there. So not my usual Barnes and Noble. My usual Barnes and Noble is lovely people, and I like all of those workers. And I'm like one of those people that like talks to the workers and stuff like that. Like I'm
Yeah.
unbearable. Um, I went to this Barnes and Noble, and I got the first book. And I went to go pay for it, and the cashier was like, "Oh, you know this is really hard sci-fi, right?" I want to be like, "Are you trying to say I'm
Bitch.
dumb?
Yeah.
Like, did I give off some like impression to you that I'm not
Can't
capable
handle
of
it.
handling hard sci-fi? And
Yeah.
also, like, why do you think I've not done the homework on a book that I'm buying?"
I love when
And
you went to a bookstore, they're like, "Can I help you find something?" And I'm like, "Oh, honey."
I
Like,
know
right?
that sounds
Like they can't
horrible.
know that I'm not a casual reader, but like,
I
no,
know,
you can't help me.
I do the same thing. I feel horrible about that because 'cause I'm like, "No, thanks, I always, like, try and play it off like, "I'm just browsing," but I'm like, "I
Yeah.
know specifically what I've come here for."
Right? And I also know like every book on your table, like just
I know.
because I work in libraries, right? It's not even like I'm not like, oh, I've read all of the books. Of
No,
course I haven't.
exactly,
It's like I
exactly.
know all of these books,
Yeah,
right? I
like,
know what I'm interested in, not interested in.
I spend my
But
free time at work looking at publishers' catalogs, like, I
yeah,
promise you I'm aware.
right? Like I'm on NetGalley
Yeah.
early every day.
Ugh, I need
So
to NetGalley, like, guess what my feedback ratio is right now?
5%? 0?
0%.
Oh geez, I'm on like 39% or
Oh
something.
my god. And I'm so, like, I tried to get the new Ann Patchett book on NetGalley, you know,
Mhm.
and they didn't give it to me, and I was like, "Those rat bastards." And then I'm
It's
like,
hard not to take it personally.
I know, right? But then
Yeah.
I'm like, "Well, I have a 0% feedback ratio. I can't be too upset." But I was like, every time I do an Ann Patchett video, it's like one of the few videos I do that gets numbers. So
Yeah.
please give this to
And
me.
you're also a huge fan. I've got the new Emily St. John Mandel that's coming out next year.
Oh, I didn't
That's
see a new
called
one.
Sea of Tranquility, and it's like it's a little bit like a Cloud Cuckoo Land or Cloud Atlas thing
Oh,
where she's got 3 timelines, like past, present, future, kind of coming, and it looks really good. I think that's out next March. This is the other thing too, is like there's a lot of stuff that I don't request or I don't read on time, but I'm just curious to know what's coming. Yeah,
my
Zan, I'd
internet's
really
acting up.
recommend the Holly. Like they're so good. Like they're worth the effort and they're not that long.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Well, I can't see you guys or anything. My
Your
internet
video's
is like,
frozen.
yeah, it has gone, something has gone horribly awry
Oh dear.
on my end of things, and I can't figure it out. Um,
It's all right. It's
well,
possible. Is you Are you on a DSLR? Is your battery dead?
no, my battery's perfectly fine. Oh, wait, wait,
Oh,
wait.
you're back. You're back. I can
Okay.
see you. Oh, yeah, you're there.
Okay. Guys, this is so embarrassing. Oh, here we are. Here we are. Here we are. I like literally all I did was like try and go to the other tab so I could look up that Emily St. John Mandel book because I wanted to know what it looked like.
Hmm.
And like my computer did not like it.
Just flailed.
Yeah, I have a soft sci-fi only face. That's so funny.
Well, that the cash, and it's a cashier too, right? Like these are not. I don't know how like different bookstores are set up, right? Like they're not the people on the floor doing book
um,
talks. Like they're literally just checking you
yeah,
out.
like yeah, I felt some kind of way. It's like one of the every once in a while, like most of the time, I love like just talking to book people, and like I'll talk to the librarians, and I'll talk to the Barnes and Noble people. Like I'm the most stereotypical Midwesterner. Um, but every once in a while, like, things happen at bookstores, and I'm like, oh, sweet Lord Jesus. So I was at. Did I already tell you this? I was at the bookstore one time, and I was picking up the new Juliet Marillier book. And the guy was like, he saw my Juliet Marillier novel, and he was like, "Oh, have you heard of Brandon Sanderson?" And I was like, "One, how do you like jump from Juliet Marillier to Brandon
To Brandon
Sanderson?
Sanderson.
Like
That
that's
feels very
quite the
different.
jump." And two, how do I answer this question? Because if I
Pull
say
up your
yes,
video. Take
oh
out
my
your
god.
phone, pull up your Mistborn video, and be like, "Look, this is my most popular video of all time. Yes, I've
Because if
heard of
I
Brandon Sanderson.
Because
Thank you."
if I say like, yeah, I've heard of Brandon Sanderson, then I'm either inviting the conversation of like he wants to talk to me as a fan,
Yeah,
or I have to be like a jerk and be like,
I hate
actually,
him.
I hated him, and I'm gonna be like a big negative Nancy to you, a perfect stranger that has no idea like how to take
Yeah,
me as a
it's
person.
awkward, right?
Or I lie and I say no, in which case that's inviting him to evangelize, which I'm not interested in.
Who reads fantasy? Like who okay, so Juliet Marillier, like not one of the most popular fantasy authors, I think we can agree on
Mhm.
BookTube having a bit of a moment, but in the general scheme of things,
No.
maybe not the biggest. So if you're a person in the fantasy section of a bookstore picking up hers as a new release, and you're telling me you haven't heard of Brandon Sanderson, like also Tolkien, have you heard of him? Like he was kind of a big deal. Like it's just
I know
such a bizarre thing.
it was a really bizarre thing. It's the same guy. Like one time, he's a nice guy that works there, but like he always gets into the longest ass conversations with me, and like not conversations that I consent to. Like I feel trapped. Like let me be clear. Like I am a talkative Midwesterner. I'm like okay, I get it. Like you know what I mean. Um,
Non-consensual bookstore conversation.
but like last time I was there, like I happened to be looking at a Raymond E. Feist book while he was
Mhm.
like in the vicinity working the ground, and like he cornered me on this Raymond E. Feist, and
Oh
like
no.
he was like, "Oh, have you read him before?" And I was like, "I was like, nope." But then he like
Nope.
gave me like an
Scamper away.
actual like Wikipedia articles information about Raymond E. Feist and like how he like came to write these worlds. I'm like, okay,
He's
thanks.
clearly that bookstore employee that like they can't not have because he's like encyclopedic knowledge. Like he is a
Yeah,
subject matter expert, but hasn't figured out the like customer service transaction etiquette, but
I
is
know.
just like the most knowledgeable person they have on staff.
I know. I mean, I'm conversational, but I'm not that conversational.
I mean, I'm Canadian, so I get
Yeah,
that. Yeah,
yeah.
we're a friendly bunch. That's too
Okay.
funny.
All
All
right.
right.
Well,
I
we've
love that we
talked a
talked
lot. I'm
about that
so
and
sorry,
then
guys.
derailed. Yeah, that's all right.
Um,
Uh,
I had a lot of fun
Hex.
though.
We're
Hex.
talking about Hex next.
I'm really excited about this. In fact, something interesting is they have a new book out, the author of Hex.
Really?
And just recently, Tor Books put up a live stream on their Instagram that was a Robin Hobb interviewing the author of Hex about
Yes,
their new book.
please. That might make me actually excited to read this because
Um,
I have
in fact,
started and I'm like, oh god.
Robin Hobb is a very big fan of Hex.
Okay, so you know what? If maybe Robin Hopkins can like she can tell me what she likes about it clearly, like in the way that she's interviewing, and I will be more excited because I am like 3 or 4 chapters in, and this
Really?
is going to be a slog for me. Like I'm just not.
Ooh.
I don't care.
Is it scary?
No,
Huh.
not at all.
I know that Caitlin liked it. I remember like back when I was first joining BookTube,
Hmm.
Caitlin talking about it and
Well,
liking
and
it.
we typically pick books that are very highly rated in their genre. Like,
Hmm.
and especially in a genre like horror where we both don't read in it. Like, we definitely were Googling like best horror books of the last 10
Yeah,
years, like that kind of stuff.
it
And this
was
was on
pretty
a
well
lot of lists.
regarded.
So, yeah. So, like, it's fine. But it hasn't been like scary. It's creepy in the way that, like, there is a witch in town and everybody's kind of in on it and it's eerie and creepy, but like maybe I just haven't hit enough of the plot yet.
Amy. That was one of my favorite videos. That was a lot of
Jeez.
fun.
Hover not.
Yeah. I looked at like all the books I had that Robin Hobb had blurbed and whether or
Mhm.
not I agreed with her.
Yeah. I skimmed through it, handle fantasy violence. Yeah, I'm not worried about the violence or anything. And honestly, like, it's funny. I listened to a bunch of, like, we've talked about this true crime stuff, and like,
Mm.
that's probably scarier than most of what I'm going to read here, because I
I
don't get so involved in books that I can't detach from them and think like, okay, well, that's the book, and now I'm gonna go do the dishes.
I am perfectly fine with like killing and all the real world violence that I should actually be afraid of. It's the second you throw in a demon where I'm like, okay, time to piss myself. Um, like my, I was my friend forced me when I first moved in with her years and years ago to watch the second season of American Horror Story.
Oh yeah, I don't want to watch any of this.
Yeah, and I was like perfectly fine with like the gruesome murder in the beginning and all this different stuff. It was when there was an exorcism that like I actually threw myself to the ground. I was like, no,
No.
no.
Yeah, I don't want to watch any, like, I am not going to watch anything horror based on a screen, but the book I don't think is going to bother me.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
we're all in it together, guys. We're
yep.
gonna, like,
Well,
somebody, other Amy Lynn was like, she's done already.
yeah. It's not a very long book, so I'm
I
excited.
don't think we purposely picked, because I think we also
Oh yeah,
keep
I
track of
can't.
page counts when we're picking titles, and we're like, oh, we'll make the horror one a bit shorter, because I think the Tchaikovsky is
Long.
longer. Yeah.
Um, I that one is pretty long actually. It's Tchaikovsky, but it'll be good.
Hmm.
Okay, guys, thank you so much for coming. Sorry that we
Yeah,
derailed. This is very typical, though. It's nice.
it's how
Listen,
we roll.
we're all still struggling socially, still from the pandemic. To be honest, I'm still not like 100% seeing friends and stuff like that. So
Yeah, no.
this is my time to talk.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for coming, and we will talk to you next month about Hex.
Good luck.
Ooh. Yep. Bye, guys.
Bye.